welcome to tonight's lockdown live stream from Glasgow Loves EU. And my name is Rosemary Watt, and colleagues Jennifer Breslin and Bernd Potter here. Jennifer is going to be fielding the questions and by either Twitter or Facebook, and Bernd is dealing with all the technicalities and to make sure these things happen and are recorded properly. And we're delighted to welcome as our guest tonight David McDonald. David McDonald is councillor in Glasgow City Council, SNP councillor. He is the councillor for Greater Pollok in Glasgow and is also the Depute leader of Glasgow City Council and the chair of Glasgow Life. And part of David's remit is the city partnerships, international strategy, and the way the city both sells itself to the world and networks itself to the world to bring the world to us. And he's also very passionate about making these connections and keeping them going. So David, thank you again. Thank you very much indeed for coming tonight. And we're delighted to have this opportunity to talk to you. And one of the things we thought that'd be really interesting to start with is that something that many people might not know that Glasgow is involved with and why it's relevant for the Glasgow to continue to be involved with is the Eurocities network, which was set up in 1986 and now has, I believe, after all those years, it has, let's see, I need my notes here. I've obviously been rehearsing these and have forgotten the numbers, of course. 130 cities, 36 countries, 130 million people who are affected by all these discussions, and 17 UK cities continuing their involvement. And that is fantastic. So would you be able to tell us about Eurocities Network, and please?
Yes, thank you very much, Rosemary, and thank you for the invitation to come and to speak about the efforts that we're making in Glasgow to keep hearts and minds open to Glasgow and to Scotland across Europe, and for the chance to highlight the work that we do in Eurocities. I think it is one of those institutions and organisations in Europe that is relatively unknown, but is actually of huge strategic importance to those 100+ cities, Rosemary, that you mentioned, and the fact that it has 130 million European citizens behind it to give it real voice means that in the corridors of power in Europe, it is hugely respected as a network and as an organisation that can effect and bring about real change in Europe, and indeed it has done that since its inception. Glasgow joined Eurocities in 1990, that landmark year for Glasgow in Europe, the year that Glasgow was the European capital of culture, and a year really that changed how Glasgow saw itself, but how I suppose Europe also viewed Glasgow, and how I'm sure we might be able to touch on that as we go through discussions this evening. But although we've been a member of Eurocities since 1990, I think it's probably fair to say that the involvement that Glasgow has had within the network has waxed and waned with the political priorities of whichever administration was in office at the time. So I can only really speak with any confidence about the role that Glasgow has had in Eurocities since 2017 and since the election of the city government that I serve in, and we made it really clear to Eurocities on our election that we wanted to play as full a part in the network as we possibly could. I think it's ironic that at the time that in the lead up to Brexit and the referendum was probably the most important time for us to have those European connections in 2015, 2016. So the fact that we started to lose those connections into the network was really disappointing, but we were able to move fairly quickly to secure meetings with the Secretary General at Eurocities, and to get an understanding from her about what we could do to amplify Glasgow's voice in Europe, and she was incredibly helpful in saying that for too many people across Europe, Glasgow hadn't really been able to shift off the tags of, you know, the sick man of Europe and the level of poverty that we had, and that despite the innovations and the improvements that we'd made and the vibrancy that we've become known for in Europe, politically, I think those tags stuck, and we were determined to do our best to highlight to our European colleagues the level of work and investment that has gone on in Glasgow to transform the city over the last few decades. So since 2017, we've thrown ourselves into the network. We've been to many of their forums. They work on a thematic basis across a number of forums. We're now the vice chair of one of those forums looking at social affairs. My colleague Annette Christie was elected as the vice chair of that forum just last year, and she has done a really incredible job in being able to put across the priorities here in Glasgow, but also to help shape European policy. So at a time when Scotland and the UK are no longer in the room, no longer being able to be heard in those corridors of power. It's ironic, I think, now that it's cities who have the strongest voice in Europe. And the most recent example of that was just this week when my colleague Annette was chairing a meeting that had EU commissioners, that had members of the European Parliament, that had vice chairs of various working groups all together to discuss what's called the EU Child Guarantee. And so we're still ensuring that we're flying the flag for Scotland, and that Scottish policy is shaping European policy. And we don't often get the opportunity to speak about the impact that we're able to make through Eurocities, and to make people realise just how important the network is. So we take. Sorry. So I was just saying we take every opportunity to continue to highlight Glasgow, but Scotland as well. Glasgow and Edinburgh are the only two Scottish cities who are members of Eurocities. So we do ensure that we take every opportunity we can through the network to remind our European colleagues that Scotland is still European, regardless of what happens what happened during Brexit, and that we want to do the most that we can to heal the sort of self-harm that was caused to our relationship as a result of Brexit going forward.
I was really struck looking at what their aims and ambitions are, and the themes for research. As you said, working around themes, it's all about the quality of life, and it's climate, it's the child, it is how to bring in investment, transport, culture. Almost every aspect of our lives is covered by the various themes, and certainly there are different priorities from year to year. But it's extraordinary the amount of effort that goes into exchanging ideas and developing research and implementing those ideas in various areas and taking the results back generally.
Yeah, there is a regular exchange, and this has been something that's been ongoing for a while, and it's a huge benefit to Glasgow because we have the opportunity to get expertise from across our continent. And likewise be able to share expertise that we can offer from Glasgow. I think one of the most important examples over the last few years has been our work with the Roma community in Glasgow, and we have been the chair of various Roma integration groups. So we've been able to share learning and experience across Europe in those areas, and Glasgow is held in the most high regard by other European cities for the work and the integration work that we've done during that period. But we've also been able to demonstrate to Eurocities through our campaign work and our willingness to kind of roll up our sleeves and get involved and become the go-to city for Eurocities when they're looking for a city to take part in projects or to test ideas. I think they now know that Glasgow is a go-to city for them, and that we will move heaven and earth to be involved in Eurocities projects, because we realise the political benefit of maintaining those relationships, but it's the social return that we get for our citizens to be able to get the benefit of the very best of European policy and implement that into Glasgow is priceless for us. So whether it's projects that we do around the circular economy, where Glasgow works very closely with Amsterdam, projects around urban food, where we work with Milan very closely. We work with Ghent on how we tackle homelessness as cities. So there's not an issue that is relevant to the lives of Glaswegians that we are not working in some way with a European partner city or another European partner organisation like Eurocities or Urbact or Cllr. All of these organisations play a massive role in how Glasgow develops its policy and how we try and deliver better lives for our citizens.
Thank you. Jennifer, are there any questions that come in?
Yeah, so we have a question here. Could you go into a bit more detail about the EU Child Guarantee? And the question is, given EU citizens have only a few months left to apply for settled status, I'm concerned about the rights of EU-born children in Scotland after June, especially the Roma groups that you've just mentioned.
Yeah, so I think it has been a major concern to all of us that as a result of Brexit and failed negotiations, that there are any questions about people's rights. As far as we are concerned, we have been making the case repeatedly since 2016 that we need to uphold every right of a European citizen, not only European citizens based here in Glasgow, but Glaswegians and Scots and UK citizens based across Europe, because this is a two-way conversation and we need to, I think, remember that. We're sometimes too guilty to thinking that it's only about the UK and it's only about Glasgow and it's only about Scotland. But yes, the event last week was a major working group to start to develop some of the policies around the child guarantee. A lot of it is based on ensuring the health and well-being of children, and a huge part of the learning that Glasgow is providing to that is around our holiday hunger programme, for example, and about how during school holidays and also the extended lockdown period, we've been able to support the most vulnerable children in the city through food aid. A big part of it has been around digital education and how we use data and how we're using data to try and challenge some of the poverty related issues. And the new Scottish Child payment that is being introduced at Holyrood is something that other European nations are looking at, and I think with our Portuguese colleagues in particular holding the presidency of the European Council, they are looking at how they can embed those sort of fundamental children's rights and well-being into the priority work that the European Council and the European Council will take forward into their social summit, which has been held in Porto later this year, which will be the main forum where the work on the child guarantee will be finalised. So again, we're very hopeful that Glasgow will feature very heavily at that summit, where the Commission President and the European Parliament leaders and others will all be in attendance. So we very much hope to use that as an opportunity to further the examples that we've provided from Glasgow, but also to ensure that citizens' rights and children's rights in particular remain at the top of the agenda for those discussions, because we've realised that these issues are of such importance that they can't just be left to the governments, the UK government in particular, to raise them, because we know that they aren't raising these issues. So where they're failing to step up, Glasgow will do that to make sure that we are protecting the rights of every EU citizen in Glasgow, but children in particular deserve us to be taking that stance and ensuring that they are protected. And the Roma community in particular need that level of protection. We've seen too many examples where they are scapegoated, and I think we all know the dangers of that kind of action being left to fester and to grow. So we will continue to make the strongest possible case that we can to defend all of Glasgow's children.
Thank you. You mentioned other city partnerships and international strategy, which is also part of your wider remit, you know, of culture, sport, tourism, and engagement, cooperation. You know, it's a very wide remit. So how do you hone in to other groups that you think would be beneficial to learn from and to involve in Glasgow?
Yeah, it is indeed a very wide remit. I think I have probably the longest title of any business card that anyone has ever seen. We have a huge amount of international networks that we are part of, but we've also realised that you can only get out of those partnerships what you're prepared to put in. And we are starting a process of really understanding where do we get the biggest and best return, whether that's a political return or a social return for the investment of our time. And so certainly Eurocities is probably near the top of that list, but you know, we can't ignore the opportunities that we have coming up over the next year in the run up to COP to ensure that we have as strong a possible relationships with the United Nations and with a variety of climate organisations across the world, organisations like the C40 and organisations like Cllr, who are responsible for local authority sustainability across the world. We find ourselves being at the forefront of a lot of that work at the moment, and having the COP conference taking place in Glasgow towards the end of the year has really just cemented the strong reputation that Glasgow has as an international partner city, and we've seen cities across the world looking to Glasgow to develop new partnership opportunities. So our most recent partner city is in Pittsburgh in the US. Anyone who follows US local politics closely will know that the mayor of Pittsburgh was one of the most fervent proponents of the Paris climate deal, and was a regular thorn in the side of the former president. So we were very keen to establish a partnership with a city like Pittsburgh, which is similar in Glasgow to so many ways in terms of being a former post-industrial city, a city on a river, but a city that's got huge ambitions and takes real pride in its history and its heritage. So we're going through a process at the moment to look at other similar cities internationally where we can find commonalities, and we will take those opportunities on a strategic and thematic basis to develop new partnerships. We're not interested in the old style sort of twin city arrangements, which haven't really given any meaningful long-standing developments in the whole, and they quite often can become quite tokenistic. So I think what we're looking at are partnerships with other cities where we can both benefit, where we have common issues or challenges in our cities, and where we can share ideas and best practice to try and improve the lives of our citizens in our respective cities. And I think the final area of partnership working that we're doing is the development of our new international strategy. I really had hoped that we would have completed it this year. This was always the target year to complete the international strategy. Unfortunately, events have gotten in the way of that, but it's given us a chance to really reassess. We've had some expert work carried out by Glaswegians who live elsewhere around the world, who've given us a fresh perspective on the city, how we sell ourselves. We've had Professor Greg Clark and others who look at the city through a new lens, and it has given us a really strong set of recommendations about where we take Glasgow next and how we sell our city, sell the opportunities that Glasgow can offer to the world. And I think groups like this are crucial to that conversation as well. We need to have a really strong civic voice as part of our international strategy. When we talk about people making Glasgow, we've got to be true to our word and ensure that our international strategy reflects the international aims and aspirations of groups like Glasgow Loves EU, so that your voice can be part of the policy work that we are undertaking on your behalf.
Thank you. And I was wondering, how do you build in an evaluation of the outcomes and the effects on the lives of people who live in the city within the strands that you're developing?
So that's not traditionally been something that's happened. But so when I mentioned the twin city arrangements of the past, it's tended again to be the political will of the time would dictate which city we wanted to do a deal with. And I think if you were looking at some of those cities now, we might question whether or not they are actually good fits for Glasgow economically, socially, politically. Whether or not some of those cities are rights respecting cities, the kind of cities that we would actually want to be associated with. So none of that work has traditionally been in place. We've tasked council officers to go away and to put together a scoring matrix so that we can actually start to go through that process to understand what are the benefits of the international work that we're doing. By being part of an international network, does it mean that we are opening up new channels of funding, for example? So when you're part of some of these networks, it opens up opportunities that we otherwise wouldn't be eligible for. A lot of European funding, for example, at the moment, we may no longer be able to access, but having links into organisations like Eurocities allows us to be treated as third-party nations, so we can still get access to some of that funding as long as we can find a partner EU nation or city to work with. So we need to be clear that what the benefits are of our membership, and as I said, put in more to those networks and organisations where we can actually get positive returns from it, positive outcomes for everyone, because that's the whole reason for taking part in those types of networks. Isn't to allow people like me to go on trips abroad, which is one of the things that's thrown at me quite often. It's actually to try and improve the life of our citizens, but also to improve the standing of Glasgow internationally. And you only have to look at the news, I think last week, where Glasgow came out as the #1 city for European foreign investment. I think had we not spent many years as a city going out and selling Glasgow to the world, then we wouldn't be seeing those record levels of investments coming back to Glasgow. So I think we should never be embarrassed or ashamed of the work that we do to sell Glasgow internationally. It's what the city has done so well over the last 3 decades, and it's what has delivered huge results and great moments of celebration for Glasgow.
Thank you. And Jennifer, any more questions come in?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how you personally developed a love for the EU, and like which countries or kind of cultures inspired you.
Well, I think probably from not ever actually going abroad, to be honest, when I was younger. So we were one of those families that just couldn't afford to actually travel or go anywhere. I think the furthest I got up until late teenage years was we went to visit family in Ireland one year. That was about it. So if you can see the rest of my room, you can see maybe behind me, you can see these travel posters of places around Scotland, but on this other wall there's also a massive map of the world. So I've always just been interested in the places that I could never have gone to as a child, but learned about lots of them. And I think there comes I think my kind of interest in being an internationalist probably comes from my own political background and around realising the commonalities that exist amongst people, regardless of their nationality or their ethnicity or whatever their own unique identities might be. I think we are all of one human race, and I think that is something that was passed down to me through my own family. And when I got the chance to travel, when I was between leaving school and university, it was an opportunity just to access the big wide world out there and to make connections and friendships which have lasted a lifetime. When I was slightly younger, I was also the chair of the SNP's youth wing, and we developed a really strong set of political relationships across some of our sister parties across Europe. And I think it was that political dimension which is probably responsible for where I am now and having this interest in international relations. But I am hugely fortunate to have probably the best job in local government anywhere in Scotland, to be Glasgow's unofficial ambassador and to get the chance to go out here, to go out and to speak about Glasgow and to remind people that Glasgow is a great European city. It has been a great European city. It will continue to be a great European city no matter what, and that we have huge opportunities over the next few years with COP. In 2023, Glasgow is the European Capital of Sport, already announced. And we have so many major European and international events that are going to be taking place here in Glasgow that we need to celebrate that. And we need to just continue to do as much as we can to remind our European colleagues that Glasgow remains open to them. And I should say that we don't have to push too hard because they know it already, and that's the response that I get, is that our European sister cities and politicians from across Europe are willing Glasgow and Scotland back into the heart of Europe. And I quite often say, we are on the fringes of Europe in terms of our geography, but Europe is holding us very close to its heart at the moment. So we need to take every opportunity to remind ourselves of that and not to get downhearted when we see all this negative news around Brexit and everything else.
Thank you. That's very positive, and it's very hard, as you say, not to get down, but we owe it to the city and everybody who lives here to keep faith and to keep working towards, as you say, bringing as much investment and interest in the city as possible, but also taking the city's knowledge out there to share. So thank you very much. David, is there anything that you wish to finish with, or?
Yeah, I think it is really important that we continue to be positive, and that we remember that we have a huge amount of admiration in Europe for Glasgow and for Scotland, and that we are still part of that European family. We maybe feel a bit distant from our family at the moment, but that's the same for all of us as we go through this period of isolation at home. So I think what we all need to do is just remain positive, and I think it's fantastic the work that you've all been doing in keeping the conversations around Europe alive, because we don't want to just forget about the freedoms that we've accrued as European citizens over the last 5 decades. They were all far too hard won for us to just turn our backs on them. So I think just more power to all of you in the work that you've been doing. And if there's anything that we can do to support your work within the city government and the city council, then you know how to get in touch with us. So please do, and we look forward to continuing to campaign with you until we can all get back into our European home and to get comfortable back around the table, and to continue to keep that light on for Europe, just as they are keeping the light on for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.